All right, let's dive right into this. When you look at a map of Europe today, it's pretty easy to just see Germany as this fixed, unshakable cornerstone of the continent. But the reality is way more dynamic than that. What we're exploring in today's Explainer is a fascinating 2,000-year history of absolute, constant transformation. Germany's story isn't a straight line at all, it's a pendulum of reinvention. It's this incredible narrative of a region and a people continuously shifting identities, swinging from deeply fragmented tribes to iron-fisted empires, from catastrophic totalitarian regimes to the modern democratic powerhouse we know today.
To really wrap our heads around this pendulum swing, we're going to navigate through 5 distinct eras. We'll start with the fragmented foundations, then look at Bismarck and iron unification, move through the incredibly dark period of turmoil, tragedy, and totalitarianism, explore the Cold War divide, and finally, arrive at reunification and modern Germany.
Okay, Part 1, the fragmented foundations. We're going from decentralized tribes all the way to the Age of Reason.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to realize that modern Germany's roots, they don't actually lie in some massive, unified ancient state. Not at all. Instead, they begin with fiercely independent tribes. If we compress centuries of history here, a really clear pattern emerges. Think back to 9 CE, at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. These tribes successfully halted the mighty Roman Empire in its tracks. And even way later, when the Holy Roman Empire was established in 962 AD, it still wasn't a centralized monolith. It was basically a giant puzzle, a complex patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and free cities, all governed by local princes. So for a literal millennium, power in this region remained incredibly fragmented.
But here is the fascinating twist. That exact fragmentation created incredibly fertile ground for a massive cultural flourishing. Fast forward to the 17th and 18th centuries, and the Enlightenment is sweeping through these lands. And because there wasn't just one single absolute ruler suppressing thought everywhere, universities actually thrived. Thinkers started championing reason, science, and human autonomy, and they directly challenged traditional absolutism.
Immanuel Kant hit the nail right on the head with his famous challenge, dare to know. He was urging individuals to break free from intellectual immaturity. And this brilliant push for independent thought didn't just stay trapped inside academic halls. It laid the vital philosophical groundwork for personal freedom and eventually a shared cultural identity that transcended the borders of those fragmented little principalities.
All right, moving on to Part 2, Bismarck and iron unification. This is where we see the forging of an empire. Because as you can imagine, philosophical ideas alone don't just magically build a modern state. Here we literally watch the pendulum swing dramatically toward the aggressive consolidation of power under Prussia. And to understand this era, you really only need to know one word: realpolitik. This was the guiding doctrine of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. He recognized pretty quickly that unifying the German states wasn't going to happen through nice speeches. It was going to happen through iron and blood. His strategy was entirely practical. We're talking manipulative diplomacy and highly calculated military campaigns designed specifically to neutralize any opposition.
Bismarck's absolute masterstroke was the Franco-Prussian War. By provoking France into a conflict, he triggered this massive wave of nationalist fervor that finally united the northern and southern German states against a common enemy. And the victory was decisive. On January 18, 1871, the German Empire was officially proclaimed. And pointedly, they did this in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles in France. What a flex, right? In an instant, the entire map of Europe was rewritten. Germany transformed from that fragmented mosaic we talked about into a dominant, heavily industrialized continental force.
Which brings us to Part 3, turmoil, tragedy, and totalitarianism. The collapse of the Republic and the rise of Nazism. We really have to pause and examine the most catastrophic swing of this historical pendulum. It presents a very dark, difficult paradox. How exactly did a nation that produced such a vibrant cultural renaissance in the 1920s totally collapse into a brutal totalitarian regime by the 1930s? Well, the roots are heavily tied to the aftermath of World War I. You see, the Treaty of Versailles didn't just end the war. It assigned sole war guilt to Germany, demanded crushing financial reparations, and limited their army to just 100,000 men. It planted incredibly deep seeds of national humiliation. Just look at this cascade of failures within the Weimar Republic. You had those harsh Versailles reparations triggering the infamous hyperinflation of 1923, which literally wiped out middle-class savings overnight. Then, the 1929 Great Depression hits and triggers mass unemployment. But curiously, while all this economic disaster was unfolding, Germany was simultaneously experiencing this phenomenal cultural boom in art and architecture.
That artistic golden age, however, was masking some incredibly violent political fragmentation underneath. Extremist factions, particularly the NSDAP, actively exploited this chaos. They used targeted propaganda to promise a return to economic recovery and national pride.
Once Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor in 1933, the state enacted something called Gleichschaltung. This roughly translates to coordination, but in practice, it meant absolute, terrifying totalitarian control. The regime rapidly dismantled democratic institutions, violently suppressed all political dissent, completely controlled the press, and enforced horrific racial purity laws. This aggressive ideological coordination ultimately drove the nation and the entire world into the unprecedented destruction of World War II and the horrific atrocities of the Holocaust.
That somber chapter brings us to Part 4, the Cold War divide. A nation literally split in two. So, in 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally, leaving the nation physically and morally in ruins. The victorious Allied powers quite literally fractured the country, making Germany ground zero for the global ideological clash of the 20th century. On one side, you had the German Democratic Republic in the East, a communist state operating under a strict Soviet-planned economy, intensely monitored by the Stasi's secret police. On the other side, the Federal Republic of Germany, in the West, a capitalist economy rapidly rebuilding itself with the help of American Marshall Plan aid.
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how starkly these two systems diverged in everyday life. While the East prioritized centralized heavy industry, which unfortunately resulted in widespread consumer scarcity, the West fully embraced free market policies that rapidly grew a comfortable middle class. The contrast in political freedom and basic living standards became so glaring, so undeniable, that millions of East Germans began fleeing west. And to stop this massive exodus, the East constructed the Berlin Wall in 1961. It was a brutal, physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain right through the heart of the city.
And while the East basically stagnated, the West was experiencing the Wirtschaftswunder, literally the economic miracle. By leveraging their traditional historical strengths in high-quality manufacturing and mechanical engineering, alongside a robust universal banking system that pumped long-term capital into industry, West Germany achieved mind-boggling economic growth. They very quickly became one of the most powerful economies in Europe all over again.
Which leads into our final chapter, Part 5, Reunification and Modern Germany, tearing down the wall in the mind. Because the pendulum wasn't done swinging yet. By the late 1980s, the crushing economic stagnation in the East, combined with these sweeping pro-democracy movements across the entire Soviet bloc, finally began to crack the foundations of the divided nation. Just look at how incredibly fast this sequence built toward unity. Gorbachev's policies weakened Moscow's grip, which emboldens East Germans to stage massive protests. The pressure becomes totally insurmountable, and then, on November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall famously falls. Less than a year later, Germany is officially reunified. But, and it's a big but, this deeply joyous moment brought massive, immediate challenges. We're talking about integrating two totally alien systems, managing double-digit unemployment in the East, and the absolute monumental task of opening 4 million Stasi dossiers just to establish some basic transparency.
So the crucial point is that navigating these modern challenges required some deep, painful societal introspection. In fact, modern Germany is largely defined by Vergangenheitsbewältigung. It's a very complex German word for the continuous, ongoing process of coming to terms with the past. Actually, scratch that. It's more like actively reckoning with it. Because unlike after World War I, reunified Germany directly confronted its darkest historical chapters head-on. This isn't just history to them. It's a profound cultural shift. This continuous, wide-open reckoning is exactly what anchors modern Germany's identity as a staunch, unshakable defender of democracy today.
So, what does this all mean for us today? Right now, Germany stands as an absolute economic powerhouse and a central stabilizing leader within the European Union. But as we've seen together, this nation is no stranger to reinvention. The pendulum is literally always in motion. As Germany navigates the crazy complexities of the 21st century, from massive economic shifts to changing global politics, how will this deep, continuous reckoning with its fragmented, brilliant, and tragic past continue to shape its future? It is absolutely a question worth watching closely. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history that shapes our world today.